In 1918, something killed more people than World War I. More people than the Black Death killed in a century. More people than AIDS has killed in 4 decades. It killed between 50 and 100 million human beings in approximately 18 months. And then, it vanished, almost completely erased from public memory, overshadowed by the war that was ending at the same time. It was called the Spanish flu. And the story of how the world responded to it is a mirror that reflects our own failures with uncomfortable precision. The first confirmed cases appeared in March 1918 at Camp Funston, a military training base in Kansas. Soldiers began reporting headaches, high fever, and severe body aches. Within 3 weeks, over 1,000 soldiers at the camp were hospitalized, and dozens had died. The virus spread rapidly through military bases across the United States, as thousands of young men were packed into crowded barracks with poor ventilation. Then it crossed the Atlantic with American troops heading to the front lines in France, crammed into transport ships, where a single infected soldier could spread the virus to hundreds of others during the week-long crossing. By the summer of 1918, the virus had reached virtually every corner of the globe, from the remote islands of the Pacific to villages in the Arctic. But the first wave was relatively mild. It spread with extraordinary speed, but killed relatively few of those it infected. People got sick, felt terrible for a week or 10 days, and recovered. Health authorities were not particularly alarmed. There were bigger things to worry about. There was a world war going on. Then came the second wave. In September 1918, the virus mutated, and what came back was a monster unlike anything in modern medical experience. The second wave was catastrophically more lethal, and it had a feature that terrified every doctor who encountered it. It killed young, healthy adults at a much higher rate than children or the elderly. This was the exact opposite of a normal influenza strain, which typically kills the very young and very old, while sparing those in between. The 1918 virus triggered what is now called a cytokine storm, a massive overreaction of the immune system so violent that it destroyed the patient's own lung tissue from within. The stronger and more robust your immune system, the more violently it overreacted, and the faster you died. 20-year-old soldiers in the prime of their lives, in peak physical condition, were dropping dead within 12 to 24 hours of their first symptoms. A patient could feel perfectly fine at morning roll call, develop a slight cough at lunch, and be dead in the morgue by the following dawn. Their lungs would fill with fluid so rapidly that they essentially drowned from the inside. The skin of victims sometimes turned blue, purple, or even black from lack of oxygen, a condition called heliotrope cyanosis, giving patients the appearance of having been dead for days, even while they were still alive and conscious. Morgues in major cities overflowed within days. Mass graves were dug by steam shovel. In Philadelphia, where city officials refused to cancel a massive Liberty Loan parade on September 28th, despite urgent warnings from the city's top health officials, the consequences were swift and devastating. Within 72 hours of the parade, which drew hundreds of thousands of spectators packed shoulder to shoulder along Broad Street, every bed in every hospital in the city was occupied. Within a week, 2,500 Philadelphians were dead. Within 6 weeks, the death toll exceeded 12,000. Bodies piled up in homes and apartments because there were not enough coffin makers, not enough grave diggers, not enough hearses, and not enough healthy people to collect the dead. The city had to use steam shovels to dig mass burial trenches, and yet the pandemic received remarkably little press coverage while it was happening. Wartime censorship in the United States, Britain, France, Germany, and their allies suppressed reporting of anything that might harm morale or suggest weakness. Spain, which was neutral in the war and had no wartime censorship, reported on the pandemic freely and extensively, which is why it became known as the Spanish flu, even though it almost certainly did not originate in Spain. The name itself is a monument to the power of censorship. The countries that were actually hardest hit simply refused to acknowledge what was happening. Cities that implemented early, aggressive public health measures had dramatically different outcomes than those that delayed. St. Louis shut down schools, churches, theaters, and public gatherings within 2 days of its first cases and maintained restrictions for weeks. Philadelphia waited over 2 weeks and held the parade. St. Louis's death rate was less than half of Philadelphia's. The pattern, early intervention saves lives while delay costs them, was documented meticulously by public health researchers. It became a textbook case study taught in epidemiology courses for a century. The 1918 flu killed more people than the war that dominated every front page. Then it disappeared from collective memory so thoroughly that most people today cannot name it. We built monuments to the war dead on every town square in every country. We built nothing for the flu dead. We wrote thousands of novels, poems, and songs about the war, almost nothing about the pandemic. That amnesia, that collective, willful forgetting of what a respiratory pandemic can do to the world, is perhaps the most dangerous legacy of all. Because the next one is always coming. The only question is whether we will remember the lessons this time.